start, I'd like to make an announcement. On December 14, 2016, this year, next month, ICAS will hold the annual dinner, commonly known as ICAS Equity Celebration Dinner. Our guest of honor is Admiral Dennis Blair. Dennis will be our guest of honor. That's not down the calendar, we send out the notice and official invitation. That's December 14th. Now, that said, I'd like to bring on Chairman of ICAS,
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And I know we are competing with election day, and I'm impressed that we have a good turnout, and thank you. And thank you for your vote for Ambassador Caucus. I'm Shinja Kim, President of ICAS, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the ICAS Fall Special Symposium 2016. It is wonderful to have Ambassador Caucus here with us again today. Since he last spoke at the ICAS Spring Symposium about Korean Peninsula issues in May of 2006, that's 10 years ago, right in this room, Kennedy Caucus. And welcome back, Ambassador. Many things happened since then in and around the Korean Peninsula for the last 10 years. And many ideas and theories have continued to flood in the way of possible resolution for the Korean Peninsula issues, yet no promising signs have yet to be formulated. Then, the most recent development in Kuala Lumpur had captured much of our attention on the informal dialogue between the US team led by Ambassador Caucus, one of our most highly respected diplomats and North Korea experts for the last quarter century, and as the chief architect of the 1994 agreed framework. For the North Korea side, Deputy Foreign Minister Han Sung-yeol, who is the highest-ranking North Korea official engaged in such track to dialogue. Today, we are delighted and privileged that Ambassador Caucus has generously accepted our invitation, joining us, and he will share with us his insights and experience from the meeting and his vision towards the peace in the Korean Peninsula and the region at the dawn of the new administration in the United States. As far as the format of the proceeding today, after the presentation of the ambassador, there will be a Q&A session between the ambassador and the discussants, and then the floor will be open to the audience for your Q&A. Our discussants today they're all ICAS fellows. Joseph Bosco, non-resident, senior associate CSIS. William Brown, who may be standing in line at the voting booth at the moment. He is an adjunct professor at Georgetown University. Peter Hussey, President, GEO, Strategic Analysis, Senior Director, Strategic Studies, Mitchell Institute. And Tom Kim, who is also will be joining us a little later, Washington correspondent and the columnist of Korea Times in Seoul, Korea. And Larry Nitsch, Senior Associate, CSIS. And with that, I hope you enjoy the program, and let's welcome Ambassador Caucus.
Because ICAS is building a deep bench. She is 9th grader. This is how we do it.
Thank you, Dr. Kim, for this great opportunity to introduce the Honorable Robert Caucus. Ambassador Caucus served as Dean of the School of Foreign Service for 13 years until he left in July 2009 to become President of John D. and Catherine D. MacArthur Foundation. Bob was appointed Dean in 1996 after 21 years of distinguished service in a variety of government positions focusing on international security. As Ambassador-at-Large and Special Envoy for the U.S. Department of State, he dealt with the threats posed by the proliferation of ballistic missiles and weapons of mass destruction. Bob was chief U.S. negotiator during the North Korean nuclear crisis of 1994 and served as Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs and also as Deputy Executive Chairman of the UN Special Commission overseeing the disarmament of Iraq following the first Gulf War. He earned his bachelor's degree at the State University of New York at Stony Brook and his master's and doctoral degrees at Brandeis University. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Honorable Robert Gallucci.
Thanks, Lee. Good afternoon, everybody. I am pleased and honored with this invitation. Happy to be with you. As was noted, it's been 10 years. I wish I would say it was 10 years of progress, but I don't think that would be exactly appropriate under the circumstances. I am, notwithstanding the title, Sangju has titled this, and I didn't stop him. I am going to mention Kuala Lumpur. There was a small group of us, 4 of us, who traveled the 20 hours or so to meet with North Korean delegation for a couple of days, and that was just about 3 weeks ago. A word about that. For the DPRK side in that meeting, I think one of the main things they wanted to do was to explain to us why they were concerned about U.S. policy, and specifically why we were there, which is to say that they did not wish to meet with the U.S. government. That's why we're meeting in, as I'm sure you know, the Track 2 mode rather than Gov, Track 1. From our side, we explained what we understood to be the Washington perspective these days on North Korea, North Korean policy. We focused particularly on the dangers, the threats that we could see, threats or dangers to the region and to the United States. We did not represent anyone except ourselves, so we didn't issue any warnings, only observations. The key question, I think, on the minds of the representatives, led, as I think Sangju said, led by the Vice Foreign Minister Han, the chief question is, what should both sides, in this discussion, U.S. and DPRK, what should they expect and what should they want to happen early in next year with a new administration in Washington? I think we could usefully talk about that. You have a distinguished panel here. You all are, it's clear to me, been around the block on this issue. This is not your first rodeo, as they say, with North Korea, so we can have a useful discussion about that. What I want to do with my time this afternoon is lay out what I think are 6 key questions that are, for me at least, the most important, the most timely for consideration. And all the questions I want to ask are framed in terms of what does the DPRK actually believe? And then I'll give the subjects. So let's try this out, see if this works, if this is useful. First question, does the DPRK believe its own narrative on recent history? In other words, caused the collapse of the agreed framework of 1994 and brought us to the events that began in 2002. They have a narrative. What do they think led to the failure to implement the agreement of 2005 and 2007 and 8? What happened? What do they believe was the role, if any, of the DPRK in the construction of a plutonium production reactor in Syria, which was destroyed by the Israelis in 2007? What is their explanation for the failure of the leap day agreement, the events of 2011 and 2012? Now, the question I ask is, does the DPRK believe its own narrative on this recent history? My answer to that is, incredibly, yes, they do. Let me be clear about this. I have no doubt that the DPRK acted inconsistently with the terms of the agreed framework, or to put it in the vernacular, cheated on the agreed framework with their deal to accept uranium enrichment, gas centrifuge technology and equipment from Pakistan during the middle to late 90s and then into the next decade. I have no doubt that the agreed framework excluded this through its reference to the North-South Declaration on Denuclearization. That's not their view. That's my view. So I'm asking, do they believe their own view as they present it? And I'm saying, I think they do. Incredible. I have no doubt that it was North Koreans who built Yongbyon at Al-Kabar in Syria. They say it wasn't us. I say it was them. Do they, some of them, believe that North Korea is innocent of that? I believe that some of them actually think they didn't do it. I have no doubt they did. I have no doubt that over the last decade or so, since I last spoke here, the DPRK bears the principal responsibility for both sides adopting postures that both have characterized as strategic patience. In other words, I believe they bear most of the responsibility for the failure for engagement to succeed between the DPRK and the U.S. side. But for whatever it's worth to you all, I believe also that some in the DPRK believe their own rhetoric on recent history. They believe they have been wronged by the United States of America. What I'm trying to say here is, on the first point, there's room for possible misunderstanding between the DPRK and the U.S. side. One of my favorite movies is Cool Hand Luke, and there's a line in that movie where the bad guy says to the good guy, what we have here is a failure to communicate. This is supposed to be irony, because it wasn't a failure to communicate. I am not telling you that all that's going on between the DPRK and the United States of America and the Republic of Korea is a failure to communicate. I am not saying that. I'm saying that in this interpretation of recent history, there's room for misunderstanding, and I think there is some. That's one of the things I conclude. Second question, does the DPRK believe that when it achieves the capability of mating an ICBM with a nuclear weapon that could reach the continental United States, it will change everything? Answer, I think dangerously, yes, they do think that. They think everything will change when they can threaten the United States, continental United States, with an ICBM, with a nuclear warhead. I note here that some in the U.S. defense community would agree. They think U.S. vulnerability to a new third country with nuclear weapons will alter our our relationship in fundamental ways. I don't. They do. I believe that U.S. deterrent will remain credible vis-a-vis the DPRK, just as it has been vis-a-vis Russia and China. I believe that the U.S. extended deterrent to its allies in Northeast Asia, Seoul, Tokyo, will remain credible, just as our extended deterrent in NATO has remained credible vis-a-vis Russia and before that the Soviet Union. But here comes the interesting part. But what will change is the DPRK's vulnerability. Ladies and gentlemen, even those of us who are opposed to preventive war would support, indeed insist, on a preemptive strike if we judged a North Korean strike against the ROK, Japan, or the United States as being imminent. Do you see what I'm saying here? Preventive war, no. Preemptive strike, yes. And what the North Koreans will achieve is that they will create